Hey, good morning. Nice to see you all.
Good to see you.
Special, yeah, we got some of the OGs. We got Repic out in the Pittsburgh area, Aliquippa. We got, of course, the great John Dangler in Tampa. You got me and Taylor here, and we got Jason Bowman, a little special treat today.
Yes, sir.
It was about a half hour from us, actually in a cool part of town called St. Charles, Missouri. And Jason's been a great
That's where
friend.
Jason works.
Yeah, that's where he works.
The people in St. Charles are going to go, he doesn't live here.
Like when Cheryl and I go for a date, we still go to St. Charles. Like I don't want to tell anybody that, but we always go across the river. But
Quaint.
anyway, Jason's a guru in the area of content
Vintage
creation.
basketball.
No, it's not. We already know he can't shoot, but um,
That's why I said vintage.
That's
old,
right. Yeah.
old
Pound it
guys
into
that
the
have
paint.
He
basketball
does really
stories.
good in the post.
But we got what I want to frame today is around movement. Like Joel, among other things, you play kind of a key denominational role for church planting with CMA out in Pennsylvania. We get a lot of people that get interested in the concept of brave cities. Jason's really good at helping create pathways so people can go from like being inspired by something to actually learning about it to actually doing it. And I really want to talk about that. I remember back in some of you guys remember the old missional days where we had our own little missional conferences, usually, different parts of the country, but people that were reading sort of like the new missiology of the church and stuff like that. I remember on it feels like the 10th one that we did, I was, doing like a main stage talk. And I just remember looking at everybody out there and like I knew all of them because we had all been coming to the same, like we had been originally inspired by some Alan Hirsch writings. And so, um, but it's the same people that will show up anywhere because they just are so captured by the idea. And I don't normally do this, but I scrapped my entire talk and I just started to ask them, like, have any of you ever really changed anything based on all this stuff? Like, are we just still coming? We're fully bought in, but we go back to our prevailing model way of church or way of life. We just don't really ever make any changes. I mean, I feel like it's thousands of people that have emailed and written or called over the years going, oh, I was so inspired. Um, and then you wondered, is there any movement? Like what is the pathway that you go from, whew, blew my mind. Like in the scripture, it talks about, where your heart is quickened, to where you would change everything. And I just thought, Joel, maybe I want you to start thinking about, you're in a denomination that's how old?
Uh,
100.
yeah, over 125 years.
Yeah,
And
so that I mean, imagine how people have done church and missions around the world. So
It was founded on the concept of mission,
yeah,
yeah,
of
that's right.
reaching the nations.
yeah.
And I would say reaching the nations and immigrants here in the United States. Those are
Right.
probably the two
Yeah.
things. Yeah. Hmm.
So here's where I want to just kind of start with that as a backdrop, because again, we have a lot of people that will call us and go, "Hey, can we come into Alton and see what you're doing with your Brave City thing there?" And we're now kind of going like, "No, don't just come in now. Like, there's got to be like we need to know at what level of seriousness you are. Not because it's bad or good. It's just we're we're living this life out and we only have limited time. So we're trying to give our best time to people that are the closest to actually making the change and doing it. So it's not a elitist thing. It's just we have limited time.
Yeah.
But I always think when we're with people, like what can we do to help them move into action? So I want us to start, and Jason, um, both of you, I'd love for you to riff off this. From what you can tell, looking at a denominational structure, or Jason, even a personal structure, individual people surfing the web looking for content, hunger. Why don't people quickly move from inspiration to action do you think? Like, what's the holdup? Why is the church always so like? Why are we the last dude to the dance?
Hmm. Yeah. Um, my mind is going in a few different directions, but I would say because there's different kinds of people, right? It's not a monolith. I'll speak from the denominational perspective, right? It's probably like every denomination has different kinds of folks in it, right?
Yep.
I would say I would say those like apostolic or prophetic leaders are often there. I think the question is, do they feel permission, right? And there's going to be a tension in them, I think, between uh trying to find the right word, but maybe like a kind of loyalty, to the family that has maybe at its best. I mean, we all know denominationalism can take some weird turns, but at its best, this might be the place where they came to faith, where they were discipled,
Yeah.
where you and I mean all these things. Like it
That we're good to them. They were
that yeah,
life
exactly.
changing.
No, I'm really glad you said that because there is both the positives and the negatives should be recognized because there is a spectrum.
There
There's a
is
loyalty,
100%. Yes.
but there's also a shame that's
Yes,
put on
for sure.
apostolic leaders.
For sure, for sure. And and I think apostolic and prophetic leaders are going to exist in that tension between their internal loyalties, maybe the outside pressures,
Yeah.
that you're referencing, Taylor. Um, and they're often going to have a choice to make. It's going to be like, can we find permission and blessing in this thing that we love? Or are we going to have to find it outside? I just think that's the fundamental tension. And to your question about slowness, man, I feel like that's a complicated tension that takes some time for people to work out, especially if the imagination isn't present. If we don't help people have the imagination to see how the pathway
Yeah.
can be there,
Okay, so what's the Jason, you might know the name. What's the graph that shows the levels of from pioneer to early
It's the
adopter?
innovation bell curve.
Yeah, the innovation bell curve. So clearly, like we would probably say within the entire Brave City world, we are not trying to spend any of our time on late adopters or laggards. Like we just don't have that there, right? And statistics are that most of those will not ever give up the loyalty. So I think for all of us, we have to go, okay, who are we trying to influence there? I
Well,
would,
even so much, a lot of the data would say this sounds strange, but just try to hear me out when I say this. Once the late adopters are in, it's actually time to move anyways.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
yeah,
There
for
could be
sure.
some new innovation by then. So I would say within the Brave Cities world, we are primarily focused on pioneer level. So these are just wild, crazy people that just go, I'm looking for anything new to try to jump into, or early adopters. So those would be people that are open, they're even hungry. But Jason, like thinking about even like you guys run online platforms where people can find content that they're looking for. Describe what you see, like on the surfers, the people that are looking for something versus the ones that actually end up doing something different. Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, and I just, for the listeners, I want to, that bell curve, uh, it's often broken down into 5 steps. Innovators, that's who you're
Yeah.
talking about. Early
Pioneers.
adopters, early
Yep.
majority, late majority, and then laggards is
Okay,
some
good.
of the
And we
things.
would say the first three, what I was trying to hint at was the first three are really significant. I'm not saying the late majority or late adopters, however you frame it, are bad at all. I'm saying usually once it reaches that point,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, the apostolic prophetic leaders, they've moved on from this.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like they're cutting some new trail somewhere. So keep going, Jason.
Yeah, well, innovators have to innovate, right? That's just what we're gonna continue push the conversation forward wherever we are. Um, and and there's going to be early adopters that are excited about that and want to see it happen. Back to your original question, I may have missed this. Oh, online stuff. I still think as far as online communities and whatnot, and I've been talking about this opportunity and connection since about 2018. 2020, I sounded like I had been a absolute prophet, and it was so true. 2021, everyone was like, no, that's stupid. We're all getting back together. But I do think there's just more and more opportunity for us to connect than ever. I don't think that the internet, I don't think is going away. It might stick. And will continue to evolve. But I think of even like when you're talking about models for creating kingdom influence, right? Within our cities and within our neighborhoods and within our families. And, I heard that I get a chance to come alongside a lot of different leaders, almost every flavor of Christianity in North America. And somebody likened other non-prevailing models of the church to a hand hair dryer the other day. And he said,
Okay.
yeah, it's a new model, but give me the towel. It doesn't really work. I'm still going to end up wiping my hands on my pants.
Huh.
And that reflect, and I'm not picking on it because I think sometimes we butt up against like we're tug of warring with each other. And I really like how Jesus and Luke said, Luke 5, when he was talking about new wineskins versus old, he's like, look, no one who drinks the old wine thinks it's bad. Well, this guy obviously did not think it was bad. And I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying the new wine in that skin is going to break, it's going to destroy both. And so, um, there has to be innovation. But your question is so good. And I think and I would say 50% of that bell curve, according to most websites I'm looking at, will say are in the front half. It splits about 50-50.
Yeah.
Um,
They're there.
Because a lot of people are movable, if put it that way.
but you asked the right question. What is keeping them from innovating? What's keeping them from moving into these other? And I just want to get super practical. One, I think Joel mentioned a second, a plan, a path. If there's like a clear path highway, and it's very good at saying dreams come true this way, why would I get off where there's no, I don't even see an off ramp. I don't know. And then some of us are catapulted into an off ramp through our own decisions or the decisions of others. How do I keep, or we're like, hey, I want to innovate, I want to create, and then we leave. Maybe even we say, I'm going to reform this whole thing, and we nail our treaties to a door, and then we go and create almost something exactly like the thing we left.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's no plan. There's no other path. And I think, yeah, I'd love to hear what you guys are thinking about. How do we create a better path? How do we create actual plans?
Well, I have to add an alternative.
Joel's rocking forward like he's got
Rocking.
something. Okay, well, we're getting to you, bro.
I have an alternative proposal, but they need to go simultaneously. So that's why I'm bringing it up now. If I brought it up later, I think it would be too late. So we need to talk about these things at the same time. And just so you know, if you're listening to this, we are working on a path. And I thought that too, Jason. I love that you said it. When Hugh was talking, particularly, let's say, Tangible Kingdom by Hugh Halter, Shaping of Things to Come by Alan Hirsch, Organic Church by Neil Cole.
Just put the Bible in. I'd like to be part of that.
Three influential books and a lot of people that have been connected to what would be called the missional movement. No offense to any of those brothers because they're beloved friends of ours. One of them sitting here, but not much of a path. I mean, even for me as a 29-year-old, after reading Shaping, I'm like, I don't really know what to do. So I'm just gonna quit my job and move downtown and go try something. And I remember having a conversation with a really good friend of mine. And he said this exact thing to me. He said, very few people are going to do it because very few people are like you. You'll take your kids and quit your job and blah, blah, blah. And most people, he said this to me, he said, most people will think that's because you have great faith. And he said, I was your roommate in college. I've known you long enough. It's not your faith. It's your temperament. It's your personality. You're going to do it. Blah. Anyway, so there is that, but here's the other thing. This dream that we are talking about, it virtually requires life among the poor, sacrifice, and pain. And we have all been trained and raised and kind of, uh, uh, you know, formed in a world, a culture, a society, however you want to describe it. We've been made in this form to escape pain, to avoid sacrifice, true sacrifice, and to really build a life as far away from the poor as possible. So I want to talk about both of those things because I do think they have to go simultaneous. I think you're absolutely right, Jason. And I just want people to know that we are desperately working on a path. But I also want everyone to know that if you have determined, I want to live my life away from the poor, away from pain, and away from true sacrifice, do not waste your money, time, or energy on what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Joel.
Yeah, couple thoughts coming to my mind as you're all talking about the kind of from where I sit in a denomination. I think I've said this before on this podcast at some point, but there's this concept that's been helpful for me, honor what is and go around it. And I'm going to tie this, Taylor, into what you were just saying about the poor. But I think it's particularly relevant for denominations because at its best, and you're right, Taylor, there's a lot of ugliness like that needs to be acknowledged, but at its best, denominations are a kind of relational network, right?
Yep.
And high character people, no matter how innovative they are, whatever, are going to care about honor, right? Um, and so I feel like this is part of identifying a pathway is to figure out how can we still honor each other, but also go around things. And I don't mean in a dishonest way or a sneaky way. I think you can go around, with, being out in the open. But here's what I think is key to that. I think if we think that the form of church we're involved in is the only way God is working or the only, place that God is working, then we won't see the pathways to go around it, right? But if we realize that, hey, this thing I'm a part of and maybe has been formative in my life is beautiful, God has blessed it, has a history. I feel that way about the Christian Missionary Alliance, but also it is not a full expression of everything that God has done on the earth, right? Like God is out there. And where I would especially say he's out there and where we need to uncover the kingdom is among the poor, Taylor. So I've told so many pastors before who there's the folks who just aren't gonna lead change for whatever reason. I mean, we could dissect that, personality, temperament, fear, wounding, whatever. But then I do meet a kind of pastor that's excited about missional stuff, but they'll start talking about all the obstacles in their denomination or on their board or whatever. It's just like they're paralyzed. And my answer to them is typically, uh, you don't need the permission of your board to start hanging out in the public housing community in your neighborhood.
Yeah.
You just don't need anyone's permission for that.
Yeah.
Because, or identifying the two or three people who want to do that with you.
So
That
that's
doesn't
the go
require,
around.
yeah, that's the going around. It's like you don't need the sanction of a denomination for that. Jesus, that was wrapped up in your baptism to go
Yeah.
to the poor. You've already been commissioned to do that. So
Yeah.
you don't need, to go through all these like stop fighting with the elders of your church.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? To try to get some
Hey,
ministry program. Just
let me give a
you know?
let me give an example and tell me if this is in line with what you're saying. Are y'all familiar with the organization? I think it's based out of Oregon called Cahoots.
Sounds like an Oregon thing.
Look it up later. Maybe y'all can find it while we're talking, but it stands for Crisis Assistance Helping Out on the Streets.
Mm,
And it was an organization that was formed in a sense to challenge the lack of training within law enforcement.
mm,
So law enforcement, there were these countless stories of law enforcement going into crisis situations, and they didn't have the mental health or psychological training to understand that this guy with the knife is not as dangerous as you think. He just
mhm,
needs to be talked to right now. And you're going to kill him, and we understand why you're going to kill him because he's about to kill someone.
mhm,
But instead of us telling you how horrible you are and constantly marching and dishonoring what in theory, what your great grandfather has been doing and your grandfather and your father, this legacy of law enforcement, we're going to, I'm trying to use your terminology, but we're just going to go around and
right.
we're going to start something. So, number one,
Yeah.
shout out to Cahoots. I don't know if they're good, but they seem like what they're doing is amazing. Number two, I feel like that's kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah, and to tie it to your comment about the pain and the suffering of the poor, I will say that many, many times when I have this conversation with a church leader, there's not willingness to go just be with the poor. So it surfaces something, right? It's like, wait, is this about, oh, I need my identity to be affirmed somehow in the next innovative thing? Or are you just willing to
Or money. The money thing is big.
be
Can
with
I?
people where, you know, where Jesus is hanging out, right? And I think to kind of like build that out into like a systemic level is I think denominations especially have to create these other spaces. You know, some people will call it like a dual operating system. This is the concept we've been working on, but in the alliance. But it's like we've got to create these spaces where it's like, hey, let's just create the pathway for you to go around. Like, come into this space, you know, where there's more room to move, where you can try some things, where we, you know, and how can that be blessed? I think to tie that back into church history, I think that's what the monastic communities were to the established church. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like this space to do it differently, to try things, to
And this,
and not just like R&D, but like prophetic witness, right? Like, hey,
right.
we're actually engaging a radical form of discipleship that's going to end up being a radical witness to the rest of the church.
And
You know?
this is why, Jason, I think what you're saying about pathway is almost equally as important as the prophetic push against Babylon, is because, like my friend said, and he wasn't trying to discourage me, but like he said, like I know you enough to know this isn't because you're just a man of great faith. Your temperament gives you kind of a leg up in this regard. But in reality, if you could help create a pathway for more of us, we'd come. We just don't know what to do. So I don't think, my point is I don't think, let's just go with the majority. I don't think the majority of people are going, I'm not going to live the Christ life because I want to cling to my safety and security and possessions. I do think that is there, but I think it's there because they don't have a pathway.
I 100% agree. And I think that, and even let's just say, even narrow it down to leaders that have been inspired, have taken steps to train, and want to be empowered, whether it was through a denomination or a network or even just, you know, their own family or they were like, I'm going to go do this. They didn't sign up for just a life among, you know, the rich with no pain. If you guys, if anyone listening can figure out how to live a life with no pain, I'm like, I'm in, okay? So like, sorry, I don't think you can avoid, I don't think you can miss it. It's going to be painful in the suburbs. It's going to be painful in the country. It's going to be painful in the city. Like you can every income bracket has pain. Is just I don't know if there is a place where there is none. Would somebody message me? But I think I want to get real practical, and maybe I'm just a capitalist, but I was born in America. I apologize. Here's the thing. I do. You said it a minute ago, money's a big deal. So I'm not even talking about from the denominational side because I like what Joel's saying. It's not just about programs. Are you personally, you guys can go, you have permission. I'm even thinking like the user experience, someone listening, myself included. This is inspiring. There's moments that are inspiring, but now I need a path. At some point, if I'm going to lead others in this path, I'm going to have to pay some bills. And there is a very, very clear funding model articulated and trained and video coursed and how to do it well. And there is entire cottage industry on how to do it even well better. Like here's you can raise capital and you need a bit, now you need a bigger building and a bigger staff. And I have
It's
friends
still
that
working.
it's still working like that paper towel in my friend's metaphor does. And at some point, the other model does need to address cash. And I liken cash and others do too. I stole it from them to fuel or oxygen in an organism's lungs, right? Or
Yeah.
let's call it fuel in a car. We can build a beautiful new model and
Yeah.
we could sit in it. We could come to Alton and hang out with you guys and be like, man, this model is awesome. This model is the cutting edge. This model is brand new. I want this model. Look, or come to my house. Look, I built the model and it doesn't move. Why? Because there's no fuel in the tank. And I think money at some point is going to be fuel in the tank. Again, this isn't a call to just wealth building. I'm not talking about just getting rich and avoiding the poor. In fact, is there not a way to serve the poor by leaning into this conversation, figuring out the path, figuring out funding, and creating economy?
Yeah.
What St. Louis, I've been in St. Louis almost 20 years now. What it needs, I came in ready to help them go from I was going to pray them through. And I realize what they need right now. Sure, prayer is a part of it, but they need jobs.
Jobs.
Key is sustainable mission. Like we would
Yes.
just say in Brave City, you got to sustain the mission. That means your people need to be able to stay there. Somehow they can make it in that environment. And I saw a very glitzy promo for a new conference going on about the church and entrepreneurship. And five of the six very well-known leaders all pastor prevailing model mega churches. And I just went, that's not the answer for those that are going, I'm sniffing a new flower. Are there any ways into sustainable mission? Hey, Joel, can I go back for a second? Because
Yeah.
like when you think about the pathway that we're all creating, like literally everybody on the screen, we're all creating the pathway for
Mhm.
people that are inspired by brave cities. Joel mentioned today just his role in our original gangster crew over Brave Cities is about prayer. And I brought up, and I think like when I go to 500 people, why haven't any of you changed any of your life? I actually think it comes down to this. It's the issue of discernment.
Mm.
And I brought up to these guys earlier, guys like Neil Cole, some of you that have read a lot of the early missional stuff. Neil was the OG of non-institutional forms of church. And, because Neil's become a friend, he loves us. So he flew out on his own tab several times and just would pray. And he he was praying and helping us discern our calling here in Alton and as a community. So I really do think like when in the morning when my dogs want breakfast, I can throw anything on the floor and they make this noise like a vacuum where I could throw a banana peel, I could throw dog food, and they hoover it up without acknowledging what they're sucking up. And so many of us, they're surfing online trying to find like a new way to do church and life. I think a lot of leaders are used to being like that. They'll just anything. They're just consuming it, but
Yeah.
they don't get to actual behavior. And behavior change. I think that is these quiet moments where people speak into us as a community or personally as a married couple. We're literally processing, could I make an actual change to this in
Yeah.
my city? That's going to be a part of our pathway. Like we will fly in. and we will pray with you and listen with you. Um, and I don't know if that's going to be normal for most. Like Jason, you're part of that online world where people are just paying subscription fees for content, which is, again, they're just trying to get inspired. So it's all good. But there's probably not a lot offered where they can meet with live people that will get on their turf with them and come really deal with the issues, because most of the issues are more personal, interpersonal. So why or why not will this work in Alton? It's really more about Hugh and Cheryl and Taylor and Lindsay and that early community. So that will be a part of our process. We're
Yeah.
not just going to give like the gimmicks or the steps to
You know,
get to.
this whole conversation in which you just said there, Hugh, I just had my phone open to Exodus 12 and 13 and following kind of all the instructions that Moses is giving the people about their exodus from Egypt. And I keep thinking about that in this conversation because talk about like creating a pathway. I think it is our responsibility as leaders to make obedience
It
plausible,
is.
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
say to people,
Lower the branch.
yeah, there's a way out of Egypt, you know, but the caveat to that is the way out of Egypt is so weird because it's tied to God's voice.
Yeah. And
You know, so I'm
supernatural
sitting here
stuff's
like
got to happen.
reading all of you know, Moses's instructions. It's like the instructions for the Passover meal and put blood over your doorway and all this stuff. And then, you know, by the time they get to the Red Sea, you know, it's like God will fight for us. You know, He is going to deliver us. Not quite sure how this. I'm going to stick my staff over the sea, like you know what I mean. And so I feel like he
Don't
was
hashtag that
talking.
phrase.
Sorry. Better way to
We'll,
word it.
we'll name this episode "Stick My Staff Over the Sea."
That's a good name. It. I was thinking about Moses to bring it back to a holy place. I was thinking about Moses coming out of the tent of meeting, and you know how the people would stand and watch him go in
Yeah.
and come out. Man, there's something about that in the quality of this, even in discerning a pathway with denominations, right? Like I think one thing I'm realizing with mine right now is, man, part of the uncovering the kingdom is figuring out where God has already been at work in some of our thought processes, even boring stuff, policies, stuff like that, that is actually part of how God has already been making a way. And if we can discern that, you know, together, then there might be a way for us to
Well,
head.
okay. So Jason and John, give me your reaction to this because let's take the Joel's still laughing at the seat. So take the Moses story. Is there imagery there that applies to all of this now? I remember, John, remember that meeting we had with the group in Florida like 3 years ago when they asked us, I think you were there in person with us. It was like a consulting group, and they said,
Yeah.
"Who are you writing this book for?" And we tried to describe who, and really what we were describing was apostolic prophetic pioneers. And they were like, "Yeah, this is a terrible marketing idea."
There's only 16 of those people out there.
But I actually haven't changed at all. Like I
Yeah.
think the book, it it's attainable for everyone. Like the narrative, the storytelling, everyone. It's there, but the real kind of bread and butter of what we're writing is to stay with your Exodus story, Joel, is for the Moses types.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering, am I wrong in this? Like, is there a need to kind of call out the Moseses in every wilderness, every Babylon, every empire uh, environment, and that help give them the pathway? Or is this just for everyone? Because if we're talking about real movement, I personally don't really think this is just like an arbitrary narrative that anyone can do I think it's more of like, no, we need apostles and prophets that are going to go and lay a foundation, and they actually create the pathway for the people.
So okay, there's a lot, man. I would say that like in terms of our like focus and kind of aim, I think you're exactly right in terms of like focusing on builders, right? Where it's like there's someone that's going to need to be like leading the way, apostle, prophet. But back to the like question that we were asking in the beginning of like why haven't you done anything? Like you come to these things, or why isn't it being put into action? I just kept like thinking over this, and uh, the entire time we've been talking, even like anyway, this concept of like transformative experience. So like things that just change our lives, and I do think like this is something everyone needs. This is what a religious conversion is, but also it's the experience of falling in love or becoming a parent or trauma, or I think suffering is often a major thing, but people go through things. We all kind of know these moments in our lives where like I'm not the person I was
Yeah.
yesterday. For me, that was like an LSD trip, and it was like everything changed, and it's like that's one way. But there's these things, and so like
What if that was
as we're asking this question back to the denominations and churches and whatever, and then the question about is it for leaders or for everyone? I'm like, I do think the longing, the prayer is like there's some, it's just for everybody, and what the aim really is to find ways into transformative experiences. So even like Joel's suggestion, like go hang out in the housing projects, and it's like, yeah, I don't understand that. How is that tactical? It's like because you want to set the table to be transformed,
That's
right?
right.
To be made new, to actually encounter God. Like he said, like I was there, and like so go there and find me there. And so I'm trying to bring this like back to your question, because I think at a tactical level you are exactly right, but at a general level I do think there are stories, and I'm having a hard time queuing them up, where somebody who isn't, let's say, temperamental, apostolic, prophetic. What's coming to mind is the movie Forrest Gump, where somebody has a transformative experience and just starts running or whatever, where they just do something because they were just broken by that experience, by terror, by awe, by suffering, by God, by whatever that broke in, transformed who they are in their being, not in their doing. Like, but then everything about their doing changed because the state of being was transformed. And and you just can't help but see that. And people can't, they're not built leaders. They're not natural leaders, but because a power came over them. Does this make sense? Where
Yep.
like those in their lives go, man, I want some of whatever is going on over here. Or I'm just so curious why that rich dude started living on the streets, or, whatever it is, that there is a magnetic pull of interest and curiosity. And I do think God will use people that maybe don't have that temperamental gifting in a way that resembles, like in the end you go, man, that was an apostolic story. But maybe they wouldn't have, if they took the survey, the 5Q, whatever it's called, they wouldn't have been temperamentally assigned that. Hopefully this speaks somewhat to the question you're answering, but it's just kind of what I've been pondering, and for me really helpful in the question of like what the prayer is in the interactions. Like I would like this to be like a tactical attempt at something like, and this it's a turn of phrase that's probably the wrong way to say this, but like benevolent trauma. Like that this is an experience you will never be able to shake.
Yeah. By the way, I was just thinking, I think even the apostolic prophetic leaders that we've run into so far, the transition from inspiring idea to
Action.
I actually think seems to be like a 1 to 2 year, even for those level leaders. So there still is quite a bit of processing and time required for that type of a leader, pioneer. So I think we've got to just keep that in mind when we're thinking about denominational work that we're doing with CMA and Joel, and when people are hopping on an online cohort through what Jason's doing. I think the processing is really key. We can't get impatient with people. But like right now, it's very basic. Like if people go, okay, I read the book, we're inspired. What do we do? Like we will now be able to say you can jump into a 4 week online kind of. It's all the videos have been done on the key stuff we think you should consider. So that's a way that people can process, right? Um, we would say listen to these podcasts. Let's get as many as you can because these are not theoretical podcasts. These are like David and a couple or David's dudes that cross enemy lines and they've seen it. So we would say if you're listening to a Brave City podcast, these are people that have been to where you're trying to get at some level. So we'd say don't waste time and spend money trying to come do an immersion with us or to see what we're doing. That almost like that's out of order for you. Like you do the work and see if what we've experienced out of Babylon and out of Egypt is really what, where you're being pulled. But we'd say there's a process for that. I think Jason, within your world, you're providing a ton of incredible, like for that processing piece of the funnel. There
Yeah.
obviously are immersions. You can come be with us. You can be with us in Phoenix. You can be with us in Alton and Aliquippa and Tampa and other places where we're already beyond enemy line, so to speak.
Mhm.
But we would say, like, in that part, that's where the discernment pieces, the interpersonal, like, can you guys make this transition?
Well, part of what we want to try to provide with you coming to be with us, John, are those what you call them benevolent trauma.
Well, yeah, but transformative experiences.
Those
Yeah.
transformative experiences. We think that you will have those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what we're doing ultimately is we are desperate to help you find that pathway.
Yeah.
I think what Jason is saying is 100% like a kingdom idea. You got bills to pay, and we're trying to figure that out with you. We've all hustled for decades now. I think every one of us sitting here have no paycheck other than what we hustle to get. We understand the hustle, but creating those pathways is something that we're really committed to. I'm trying to synthesize the whole Moses.
Can I make a connection there? I have something in my mind.
Oh, one other thing I was going to say, Joel, but there are some questions that I think are necessary. And I don't know how to frame them because I don't want to frame in like the context of shame. But I still push that question of like, there is no kingdom pursuit in congruence with avoidance of the poor.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to ask that question properly, but I do know, I want y'all to know that Hugh and I have had multiple experiences that go into kind of the experiment beaker, like, let's figure this thing out, where guys have said that I'm not willing to do that.
No.
I don't want to put myself in any form of danger or risk. And I don't know how to navigate that.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Joel.
This is maybe one synthesizing thought, but the part of Moses's instructions I was reading is the Passover meal. You want to talk about like transformative experience, or we could even say benevolent trauma. There's like blood involved. You're going to have to do this horrible thing, as a family. But it's like, man, I'm sitting here thinking that was so genius, of God. But it's like, hey, you're not just going to go get on this new journey. It's like you're actually going to do this whole thing, and there are some traumatic elements. I mean, the killing of the animal, but
The whole
also
thing is a trauma. Like
the death of the
entire thing.
firstborn. I
Just
mean,
trauma.
all that kind of stuff. But it's like you're not going to be the same after this. But it's also the Passover meal is also good news. It's also eschatological. It's also the opposite of shame. You know what I mean? It's
Right.
it's the proclaiming of the kingdom. It's all those things wrapped up into it. And it's like, wow, I wonder if that's what we're aiming for, is the building of those kinds of environments where all of that stuff is happening, together.
So we're gonna call this benevolent trauma, a pathway to change.
Oh, we were so close. I just texted John the title,
Is that
and it was Benevolent Trauma, a Pathway to Brave Cities.
okay? Dang it. All right, well,
Change
that's
it.
probably better. That's fine.
That
Hey, can I just in that Moses metaphor and man, this is terrible marketing, you guys. Benevolent trauma, a life among the poor, sacrifice and pain. Join us next week.
hey,
for 18
that's what the
people.
could have
Join us
been
next
Yeah.
week
here.
for the
No,
Holocaust
Jason, that's
and
exactly
apocalypse.
this group.
We're
This
back
group
at the
told
table.
us.
We're still broke.
They said y'all will only be failures if you go
Yeah,
this direction.
that was good advice they gave you. I think I think there's something, as you think about Moses in the wilderness, right? There was and the book of Leviticus. Let's just pass past Exodus for a second. There's really thrilling stuff here. But you have three major things going on there that every one of us need to figure out. And I love that Brave Cities is figuring it out because it wants to create not just one path, but I think that ideally, whether it's a denomination, the individuals listening have to figure out their own path. And I think the Brave Cities is going to figure out a path to helping them figure out their path. But the three parts of Leviticus, if I were to summarize it, is the structure. Every organization, every human being has to have solid structure or you can't even stand up. So there's a structural component to this.
Right.
And a third of Leviticus is based on the structure of the tabernacle. Like we need poles and we need fabric, and here's how it's going to be laid out. And then you need systems. And I think that's what's going to change my life. Like when I did like John's idea for an LSD immersion, but did I hear that mentioned right earlier? But
Yeah.
Yeah, I got one scheduled next month. If you get
He meant literal.
But I think where my life changed from let's call it substance abuse. I mean that's what the counselor called it. So when my life changed from addiction, I had to do things different. I had to have a new structure to my life, and I had to have new systems. We're talking about daily personal habits. So structure, and then the third of Leviticus is the systems. On this day you do this, and on that day they do that, and these people carry this, and you carry that, and there's the systems and how we operate, and each one of us are going to need to figure that out. That does have to do with finance. It has to do with our own daily routines, the networks we're a part of, structure, systems, and then a third of it is the spirit. Now we need that. That's where immersions are important, right? Getting together to dream and suffer together, but also be inspired and see that the model can be different, answer questions, but you have to have all three: structure, systems, and that enthusiastic,
All right. That was the most responsible way we've ever ended a podcast. So we want to thank you. Like, seriously.
Yeah,
That's
come on.
great.
Come on anytime you want, Jason, just to end it well. Because no, it's funny. This is what we do. We just blabber for an hour and then we have no idea how to culminate anything.
So one thing just on the heels of that I'd like to
and then once we have the perfect ending, John or
John
Hugh starts
over.
talking again.
Yeah. But no, that was so as you bring those points into like the kind of structure and the systems and tying that back to the questions we were asking around the Exodus story and even like Passover is like, as he was sharing that, I was actually thinking like about the ritualization of that over time, like the sacred ritual, the remembrance of that thing. And when you were talking about habits, I was like, oh, this is ritual in day-to-day life, like the morning the routine ritual, whatever you want to call it. And even like some of the economic structures, the idea that that's like just the ordering of the household, right? And that like our problems aren't necessarily like economic as much as ethical. I think that's one of the things we're trying to wrestle with is like the ethics that create the economics, right? Like the inclusion of the poor, that it isn't just the North Star isn't necessary. The North Star's kingdom, not capital, but the capital, there's a necessity. Like you were talking about fuel. And I just thought it was a really good word on systems of structure. And also to say like, there's ancient versions of this in our kind of like legacy that we need to be careful as we're going, hey, we're not talking about this this construct institutional Sunday centric thing, and yet also not throwing out the table, not throwing out the
Right.
like the Lenten fast or whatever, like the things that like deeply transform us in prayer and worship and ritual. And
Yep.
anyway,
You don't
That's
have
good,
to live like Babylon,
yeah.
right? Like there's a way of life, an alternative. Yeah.
Yeah.
and we're called to live an alternative, right? That is the be holy, be different.
It's good. Good summary. I love it. Hey, thank you. Jason Dow, look at that. That's like his
He just transported
right?
to
That was
All
incredible.
right. You all have a good life till we see you again.